Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Malkovich with McKell, Thompson, and Hunter attorneys. I am president of the Spanish Fork Salem Chamber of Commerce, and we are excited to have you here today. We have Congressman John Curtis, who will be speaking to us in a moment. But before that, we'd like to turn the time over to Vartan Jehanian, who is the manager of the Western Region Office for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much, Carrie. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Vartan Jehanian. I'm with the Western Region of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber is the world's largest business federation. We represent the interests of 3 million businesses around the world, most of which are small firms, under 10 employees, so we're really a small business-based organization. So my role at the U.S. Chamber is twofold. One, I'm a federal lobbyist, so I work on advocating for issues on behalf of small business people. And my second role is that I serve as a liaison between the local and state chambers and the U.S. Chamber. So have an opportunity to work with Carrie and chambers around my region, which includes California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Hawaii. So I got the really lucky region from our 7 regional offices. So one of the best parts of my job is that I have the opportunity to help recognize members of Congress who have been supportive of the business community. And one of the ways we do that is by presenting members with what we call the Spirit of Enterprise Award. This award is presented to members of Congress based on some key votes that they take in Washington. For example, last year, during the second session of the 115th Congress, we looked at 12 different votes on issues ranging anywhere from repealing the medical device tax, which gives the medical community an opportunity to lower costs in healthcare, and also it helps support innovation, to issues like repealing parts of Dodd-Frank, which will give small businesses more access to capital from local community banks. So after we looked at these 12 different votes, those members of Congress that scored at least 70% on our scorecard were eligible to receive our award. And I'm very, very happy to say that your very own congressman here, Congressman John Curtis, not only received that 70%, but he scored well above that. And really, during his time here locally as mayor of Provo, he's been a stalwart champion for the small business community. So I'm very, very pleased today, on behalf of the U.S. Chamber, to present Congressman John Curtis with our Spirit of Enterprise Award. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for making the journey to be here with us today. I'm just telling you, these are the best small businesses in your region. Right?
Aren't we lucky? Our congressman is such an advocate for the business community. As you know, he has been serving us in the 3rd District here, representing our House District 13 in Congress since 2017. He has been an advocate for cities and towns, as those of us who serve in those capacities know. He's also been a strong advocate for business. He's formerly on the Small Business Committee, and his staff tells me that he is lobbying to be on Energy and Commerce, which will even be a much bigger role in helping the businesses of America. So with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Congressman Stewart. Congressman Stewart, oh my gosh, edit that out. I don't know, John, how come I did that? I am so sorry. Congressman Curtis, who is my dear friend.
Was.
I don't know why.
That's all right, Alice. You call me anything you want. Hey, what an introduction. And those of you that know Carrie know that I should not let her get off easy, right? No. She's usually after me, and I'm glad I've got this one little, and we got it on film. And you're blushing.
He's going to edit that out.
No. No way. Well, I'm glad to be with you. I am John Curtis. And she mentioned Chris Stewart. I don't know how many of you know Representative Chris Stewart, but I will just tell you, he is one of my favorite Congress people back in Washington, D.C. So it's actually quite a compliment to be called Chris Stewart. I don't know of anybody who works with less flash and more work than Chris Stewart. Just a super good guy. Well, it's fun to be with you. I have to tell you that as I was driving here today, going through my mind was what an incredible place this is. And then that's exasperated right by this drive up through here and the parking in this beautiful building. And let me contrast that just a little bit. And by the way, I'm just going to talk a few minutes, then we're going to do questions. So if you've got questions, please start thinking of them. But let me contrast that with my last week. Last week at this time, I was in Israel. And this is an interesting question for you. How many of you have heard of all this going on with a couple Congress members that can't go to, you've all heard about that? How many of you have heard that last week 70 Congress members were in Israel? News doesn't want to report that because we were there getting along, Republicans and Democrats, studying the issues and trying to understand what was happening in that region of the world. And I don't know, but close to zero press on that, and they all want to talk about the one or two that are not getting along. So that's kind of, by the way, a daily occurrence in what I do. You see a very different picture than what we see back there. And it is true, the things that you hear and the yuck and things are right, but there's also just tons and tons and tons of good things happening back there as well. Part of this trip was understanding from Israel's perspective their position in the world. And we saw firsthand the Iron Dome defense system that shoots down missiles as they come over. But just think about that for a minute, living in a community, in a country, in a state, where that's something that you talk about a lot, is missiles coming in. They've got this presidential election going on, and over and over and over again, they kept saying the only issue, so like, debates and what do you ask, the only issue is national security. Everything is miles and miles behind that. It's all about national security. And we traveled up to the Golan Heights up in northern Israel and sat on a place where you could look and see several hundred yards away a boundary line, a wall, by the way, and on the other side of that, a Hezbollah flag, literally a couple hundred yards away from Israel. And they showed us where they had intercepted tunnels coming underneath that wall where people would come in at night, do their destruction, and go back through. And I share that with you, A, because it's on my mind, but B, what an amazing contrast we have here of safety and security and a beautiful place to live where, yes, we're worried about security, but we're worried about your businesses and their success and all of those things. And we just really live in a great place. Earlier today, I was at the Intermountain Healthcare, and they were showing me drawings for your new hospital. And also came through my mind of what a great community, what a great place to live with assets like that. And holy cow, you have a Costco, right? Where's our Costco people? I let them know how angry I was that Provo doesn't have a Costco. But now I represent the entire district, and I'm actually okay with that, Mayor. My hats off to your mayor. Mayor Leifson and I have had an opportunity to work together for many years. Couldn't have a better person representing you. And I don't often admit it in public, but I actually like him. So we've got some council members here today. Raise your hand if you're on the council of Salem and Woodland Hills and Spanish Fork. Well, what else have we got? Any other cities represented? Elkridge. Anybody from Elkridge? We've got some candidates. Raise your hand. Just one candidate. Okay, raise your hands. Some of you are both candidates on both sides of this. Well, my hat's off to you. I know firsthand that putting your name out there and running for an office is a scary thing. And remember when we were in elementary school and the teacher had you put your head on your desk, right, and you voted for a class president? Did you do that? We did that in my elementary school. This is kind of the big person version of that, right? And it's a scary thing. Your neighbors, your friends, they put lawn signs out that may not have your name on them. People say things. When I ran for Congress, there was literally, some of you remember, an ad on the radio that talked about the way I tucked my shirt in. True story. And so running for office is hard. So my hat's off to all of you who do that. And thank you for doing that. My experience having served in Provo and on a federal level is the most important work that's done is done here locally in your cities. And you guys make much harder decisions than we do. You also balance your budget, which we don't do. So my hat's off to all of you. I can keep going for a minute, but I'd love to kind of go where you want it to go. Do you have questions, or do you want me to just share some more thoughts with you? I loved being mayor of Provo probably more than anything I've ever. Thank you. More than anything I've ever done professionally in my life. I just loved it. I've told a few people here today the difference between being mayor and what I do is when you were mayor, so your city was cheering for you. Even people who disagreed with you ultimately wanted you to be successful. We live in that type of community, right? And I'm now in a world where about half the people wake up thinking, how can we undermine and destroy and take him down, right? And that's kind of the world that we live in. And so I miss it very much. To be honest with you, I'm really out of touch with Provo city issues and city issues. And I live this kind of crazy life where I hop on an airplane and go away for a long time and come back for 2 days and then hop on an airplane and go away. So I don't have a really good pulse on what some of those changes are. I have watched things like the completion of UVX and what I call BRT. I'm told it's up to 12,000 riders per day right now, and that's with the students gone, and that pleases me. It's this county, and you all know this, is going to double in size in a couple of decades, and I believe for all of you as businesses and elected officials, that's got to be your single biggest challenge. How do you accommodate that growth without losing what you love so much and the reason that you moved here? And that's a scary thing. I think we had a question here and then right here. So I'm going to tell you my favorite.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, the question was, I mentioned just briefly how there are a lot of good things going on that you don't hear about, and she's asked for maybe some specifics and legislation. Let me tell you my favorite story, and I'm going to apologize to some of you who may have heard this, but I like it so much that it's literally my favorite story. One of the biggest problems that we have in the country is opioid misuse and abuse. It would be hard to find anybody in this room who didn't have somebody, a relative, a friend, a neighbor, that had been impacted in a pretty dramatic way by opioid abuse. Fair statement? And last fall, when we were in the majority, one of the very special things that you get asked to do from time to time is preside on the House floor. Imagine how cool that is. You stand up on the House floor and you conduct the business of the House. And I was asked to do this at a particular time when we were debating 67 opioid bills. And the way the debate works is the Republicans get a certain amount of time, and then the Democrats get a certain amount of time, and then we vote on it. And the debate went something like this. On the first bill, the Republicans stood up and said, these are really good bills. Would like to thank our Democratic colleagues for their help on these bills. Please vote for these bills. And he sat down. Didn't use the rest of their time. Democrats stood up and said, these are really good bills. Would like to thank our Republican colleagues for their help on these bills. Please vote for these bills. 67 times that happened. They passed in a near unanimous fashion. We rolled them into one bill because that crazy Senate can only do one thing at a time. We knew they couldn't handle 67 bills, right? You get it. And sent over to the Senate. They passed it in a near unanimous fashion. It was signed into law by the President of the United States. Isn't that exactly what you expect of us, right? That's why it's so cool. You expect us to go back there, find answers, find solutions to hard things, work together, and get them passed. How many of you heard about that in the press? And that's my point. Isn't that sad?
I always wonder, because that's one that you all agreed on. I want to know when there's compromise. I never hear of any compromise. It's just always either we agree or disagree and we're not going to compromise.
Well, there was another pretty substantial bill that passed last year, Judicial Reform, where there was a lot of disagreement. And Republicans and Democrats see that very differently and actually came together, passed a significant piece of judicial reform legislation that went to the Senate and passed and went through. This is a really interesting kind of a procedural thing. It may bore you, but let me share it with you since you asked. We have a choice when we put a bill forward on whether or not you can take one of two paths. One is it just goes through the normal path, and that path goes to a rules committee, and they make up rules that determine how your bill will pass, how long the debate will be, and different things like that. Or if you'd like to fast track your bill, you can put it on what's called suspension. And they use the word suspension because you suspend all those rules, and fast track it, and we vote on it, but you have to agree to a 2/3 majority vote. 70% of what we pass is on suspension. Yeah, 70%. Now, since you ask, I'm going to brag about one of my bills.
And that's now the Congress
Yes.
now as opposed to
Both. Both. Actually, both. Yeah. One of the bills in Utah, one of the things that causes the most angst is public lands. We get really frustrated because the federal government wants to come tell us what to do. And in certain of our counties that are in my district, we have counties with up to 90% federal land. Now, those of you in elected office, imagine 90% of your property not producing property tax. And you're trying to pave roads and put in police, schools and police and fire and things like that. There's a lot of controversy with this. Bears Ears was a really good example of angst that didn't work out well, and it's a mess. Right near Bears Ears is Emery County, San Rafael Swell. I don't know how many of you recreate down there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. We just put a bill into law this year in a Democratic House where we found agreement between environmentalists and ranchers and many in the outdoor community. 1 million acres where we came together and said, we're going to preserve and protect over here, we're going to graze over here, we're going to recreate over here, and found agreement with those groups that never agree. And that bill passed this year in the Democratic House, one of the largest public lands bills in the state's history. So there really is good stuff happening back there. And that's not to say it's all good, and I'll be the first to tell you that.
So my question was, what was your biggest surprise when you got to Congress? And then second of all, based on what you said, we can't live on C-SPAN and we all have lives, but how can we
know what's going on?
know what's going on?
Sure.
The way you explained it, easiest way.
Yeah, okay. And you got me distracted. What was your first question?
Oh, your biggest surprise.
Biggest surprise, thank you. So my biggest surprise, I like to tell people, maybe you've heard me say this, is that there are actually a lot of really good people there. I rarely meet with a colleague, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter, that I don't walk away and say, it's a really good human being. We may be very, very different on how we see things, but we came really for the same reasons, and we're doing our best. I have a bill in right now that I just co-sponsored with a Democratic congressman from Colorado, Congressman Nagus. He's young, he's bright, he's energetic, and we fight head-to-head on public lands issues and see it very, very differently. And we just co-sponsored a bill that I'm really pleased to be on with him. It's a soils bill. It's actually, those of you that are concerned about the climate, it deals with soils and the way they're absorbing carbon into the soils, and in a study to learn more about that. So that was my biggest surprise. And now you've made me forget your second question.
How can you know what's going on?
Oh, how can you, thank you, yeah. You can see that since I've gone back there, I've aged and I'm losing my memory. And
Other than watching Fox News?
yeah. So when I first went back to Washington, I would turn on, and we were on the airplane, Corey and I, a lot. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce my staff. Corey Norman's Chief of Staff here. Lori Falk is my District Director, and pleased that they could be with us. Corey goes back and forth with me a lot. And one of the things you can do on the plane is watch Fox and CNN. So for a while I said, I know how to beat this. I'm going to watch a little Fox, and I'm going to watch a little CNN. I'm going to get it balanced, right? Well, what I found is you can't balance when you're two out of balances doesn't make a balanced. Does that make sense? And I rarely, quite frankly, go to those sources for news anymore. I love the Wall Street Journal. I find that to be a really good source of information. Quite frankly, I like I spend a few minutes on all the local papers here every morning. I think that's important. I would seek out those sources. This is a pitch right here to sign up for my newsletter. If you go onto my website, curtis.house.gov, and sign up for the newsletter, we'll send one out and tell you what we're doing, and would love to have you getting that information. Obviously, coming to events like this, hearing straight from me, I think is just super important. We've done over 150 town halls, and one of the reasons I do them is I realize it's about the only way to give really good information with deep answers to somebody, not just a tweet, right, or just a short little answer.
So I realize we've gone from an all-congressman group that were all Republicans when me alone was in, and now we have Ben McAdams. I'm not really into a lot of the jockeying in politics, but I kind of casually watch this, and I know that this is kind of a big deal on a national level when that seat comes up again. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about how did things work when it was an all-Republican group, and then how does it work with Congressman McAdams? And I know the Republicans are making a big deal about it, Democrats, but as the public, should we, what do you see?
It's a hard question. I don't mind telling you. I served with Ben McAdams as mayor. He was the mayor of Salt Lake County. I got to know him. I can't think of a single mean thing to say about Ben McAdams. He's a very, very decent human being. He's a great family man, hard worker, represents all of those things. But son of a gun, he's in the way of a Republican seat that we need to take the House back. And that matters.
Okay.
It does. And so you'll never, I don't believe you'll ever hear me say anything derogatory about him as an individual, and even the work that he's doing back there. But holding a majority is a major thing back in Washington, D.C. The majority sets the agenda and decides what we're going to vote on and when we're going to vote on what we debate, and it's a really big thing. And that's based on number of seats.
That's very helpful. I've always thought that. I'm like, God, I vote for someone based on their character and based on who they are as an individual. Who's the most honest of the two candidates? That's who I'm voting for. But then there's this side that says, you know what, it's all about the party, the majority, and it affects, we saw this with our Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, you're right now.
But now you're saying it as a congressman, you see it in the House where you don't have a majority, it affects the law. So he's in the way of Republicans.
Now, to you Democrats, I hope I just called that straight, right?
No, you did. And from what I see, he's a great guy.
He's a tremendous guy.
Awesome guy.
Yeah.
Congressman Curtis.
Yes.
I
Les
want to ask
Francis, how are you?
you- Exactly. I want to ask you, you know, it's forecasted, we have been doing pretty well in Utah with our business communities.
Yeah.
It's forecasted that there might be a recession coming up in the next year or so. We were able to ride through the 2008 recession pretty good, but for our business community here, what do you feel as a federal leader on that subject?
I've got kind of an interesting answer. I may shock you all just a little bit here, but when I hear there's talk of a recession, I say to myself, and you're surprised? We've had this amazing growth spurt, right? And you're telling me that there's not a reality that this is part of the business cycle, right? You all see this in your businesses, right? If you guys had years and years and years of plenty and growing and growing and growing, and somebody said, ooh, we're going to have a tough 6 months, would you be surprised? And that's how I view the country. Fundamentals are good, and I think that's what's important. But could we have a recession? Absolutely. Is there anybody on the earth better prepared for hard times than Utah and Utah businesses, right? We get that. We plan, we're careful, we don't extend our debt too much as a general rule, and that's how we weather these things. And so my hope is that in your businesses, you're following what we do so well here in Utah of good fiscal practices, what your cities and the state are mandated to do, and my guess is you'll be just fine. I can't fathom any scenario that reaches the calamity of 2009. Right? And so there's all sorts of types of recessions. But I wouldn't overly stress what seems to be coming. And quite frankly, I think the tariffs have had a lot to do with it. My guess is many of you in this room have been hurt by the tariffs. My district is 99% small businesses, and small businesses are disproportionately hurt with the tariffs. A big business can weather a tariff, right? It's one product, we've got other products, we've got other sources. Many of our small businesses have one product coming from one source, and it's taken them years to develop that, and now in days they have to figure out how to accommodate for that. And so I'm worried about tariffs. I speak out frequently that it's not how I would have done it. I do think we need to acknowledge that we have some serious problems with China. They've been a bad actor, And absolutely we need to take steps to correct that. But this is a very painful step, and quite frankly, it's really hurting our economy and our small businesses.
Under control and
Well, as I mentioned, we have serious problems with China. And I think what I would say is, I wish we've got some tools in a toolbox that are not tariffs. I wish we would have used those first. Does that make sense? Here and then, yeah, back there.
So healthcare.gov, the marketplace. Is it as deceptive for you as it is for us?
Well, I'm not quite sure how deceptive it is for you, but it's pretty bad. I am mandated, by the way, to be on the Affordable Care Act, and I get a choice of whether or not I put my staff on it. And you won't be surprised to know that I don't mandate to them that they have to be on it, because it's just not a very good way to go. Healthcare is very, very problematic right now in our country. And what we're seeing is a reaction to a lack of answers. And what I mean by that is, because we don't have answers, they're coming forward with Medicare for all, right? Okay, well, we've got the answers, Medicare for all. There are not very many, well, I'm going to be real careful how I say it. I'm going to rephrase how I say that. It's a bad idea. It's just a really bad idea. In the first place, the rest of healthcare, quite frankly, is supplementing Medicare right now. So Medicare for all, who supplements when we move it to everybody, right? And if you think government healthcare is the way to go, are there any veterans in here? And how's that working for you? The VA.
Good, I have a question about that.
Okay, hang on just a minute. Let me finish my point here. But just overall, the VA health system has not been a model of the way we want to insure ourselves. One of the things that I think that is happening that we don't talk about enough is that when Republicans failed to remove Affordable Care Act, you all remember that famous moment where McCain came up and voted no, and that was kind of the signal that was not going to be undone. There was an effort forward, not necessarily to remove Affordable Care Act, but to change it. And there have been a series of changes, gradual, small changes along the way that I think are helping change the trajectory and get it into a better place. It's a high priority for Congress, and we're struggling and looking for ideas, and they have to be bipartisan. Nothing passes Congress right now if it's not bipartisan. With the Democrats in control of the House, you have to come up with bipartisan proposals. And a lot of time and energy is going into trying to determine what those are to change that. I said here, and then we'll come, yeah.
What's your views on the Hong Kong situation? It seems like a flashpoint. You've got China it seems like China wants to come in and put an end to that. There's going to be some political backlash worldwide. I mean, what's the stance from your discussions amongst you?
Yeah, I serve on Foreign Affairs, and this Foreign Affairs chair and ranking member issued a statement a few days ago warning China not to use force and military involvement in that, and that would be perceived very, very poorly by us. And I think all of us here in the United States feel very strongly about that. These people should be allowed to have a democracy and control of their government. But not only is it the right thing to do, it's the law, and it's what China agreed to give them that freedom. You're seeing, I think, a pattern with China where outwardly they're telling you what you want to hear, and then behind the scenes they're doing what they want to do. And I think we're seeing that with the trade talks a little bit where, yeah, we'll work with you, yeah, we'll bring some things down, yeah, this will all be fine, but then all the actions back here don't exemplify that. And I think we're seeing a similar thing here. You bet, Hong Kong, you can rule yourself. Oh, oops, unless you do something we don't like. And then you can't rule yourself. And we're going to come in with military force. And Tiananmen Square is eerily too close, right, what they did there. And if we think, oh no, they wouldn't come in with power and force, just remember Tiananmen Square.
What happens if they do it? Does the U.S. just give verbal warnings, or they
let's go bigger picture for a minute and just talk about foreign affairs in general, because North Korea, Iran, we're all seeing. I mentioned I was in Israel, and you hear and feel Iran like breathing down your neck. And these are people who literally have said they want to wipe out and destroy Israel and Israel's friends. And so there is a great deal of concern about peace and stability around the world. And I've been blessed to travel a lot in my role of foreign affairs. I've seen firsthand the role of the United States in countries and regions around the world in stabilizing those regions, and it is incredibly important. The work we do, the foreign aid dollars that we like to complain about spending, are dollars that protect our young men and women from going into war, literally. And I mean that dramatically. It sounds dramatic, but it's literally true. And these diplomacy efforts around the world and all of these things around the world are just really important. And it feels to me like, well, it's never been this way, but I think it's kind of always been this way because I'm just saying it now, right? But I just think we have to be ever vigilant and careful of those out there who would do us and our friends around the world harm. That was kind of gloom and doom, wasn't it? Are you telling me I'm out of time?
Unfortunately.
Okay, I'm out of time.
Lori was going to tell you.
I'll contact your
Good,
office.
good.
But we
Yeah.
do. We have a little gift.
Are
for
you serious?
This-
Oh, this totally makes up.
I know, and
for-
it says, now what? Oh, yeah, it makes up.
says Congressman Stewart.
I had just come from a meeting talking about him with the suicide hotline.
Yes.
And so he was on my mind a little
This
bit.
is
You were on
this
my
is
mind. But
beautiful.
this is a gift from us to you,
Oh, how
so
kind.
that you can remember the Spanish Fork area and how much we appreciate all
Oh,
that you
that's-
have done for our cities as well as for our business community. And we just really appreciate you coming here today.
Well, thank you. I trust you all know what affiliation I have in my heart for you, being part of the community of what I call Provo and the broader area and the relationship that we have with you. Thank you for all you do, and thanks for being business people. Holy cow, you are the wills. Back in D.C., we like to think it's government that makes this country go around, but this is one guy that actually knows that you're the wills that make this country go around.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're the best.